Why?
Matt, you've sort of heard the Sharks uh, go north, south, east, west, everywhere. Um, it's your time, Matt, right now to sort of encapsulate what you do with what you've heard.
Yeah, I want to go back to and hit on a few things because there's some great points in there. Mike had brought up the triangle of the parents, the coaches, and the players, and how trying to keep that in sync. I think the one thing that we see, especially maybe more specifically Canada and the U.S., but it started to integrate everywhere, is that addition to that triangle of skills coaches of not the parents are not just relying on the coach to teach them everything. They can now go and work with a coach that can help their kids skate better or shoot better or get stronger or and all those different things. So when you talk about investment, there's not just for parents, it's not just the enrollment of the league anymore. They're now using all these different other avenues to try to improve their kids' skills. The problem that some associations that I've talked to have run into already is the parents are now bringing that and using that not against the association, but bring that to say, my son has gotten better doing this because he's been working with a skating coach. He's been doing this, but they haven't seen him being used any different on the team because of even for the investment that they've made outside that. So there's now more people that are in the pot, more hands, more minds that are kind of conjoining that than ever. And that's really starting to confuse coaches. I would suggest confuse players of who they're listening to, and they've got a skills coach that is pumping them up, saying, "Oh, you should be on the power play. You should be able to do this. You should do that." When he goes to his team, if he's not, or if things have not changed, and depending on where it is, it's now a negative on the team when the team is trying to gradually develop them and improve them as they do with everybody else. So there's some other voices in there that a lot of different programs or coaches are having to deal with too, because players are going outside of the 2.5 hours, like Mike had said, for practices to try to find those initial skills. And I think the word investment has been interesting in this conversation, and I use that in comparison to a couple of the programs specifically. The one that of the ones that I did in that first year, the one that really spoke to me the most, the one I enjoyed the most, was Jokerit in Finland. The people that were involved there, and just the philosophy and mindset, I thought was just fascinating. And they're one of those programs that they have somebody that starts with the coaching side of things at U7. They've got assistant coaches, which are normally parents or whoever's volunteer, if they do have volunteers and what have you. And they stay with that group until they're in U12. So once they get past U12 into U13, U14, whatever their level would be, that's when they get into more of a coach for a coach's sake. Jokerit had or did have until recently full-time coaches at U15 and up. So they kind of hand that off. But you see and work with the kids in the development over the course of that year and learn them and their niches and work with them specifically over a much wider window than what Mike was talking about in that 5 months. And there's just there's the investment side of things as looking at, I find in Europe, specifically with the programs that I've talked to and in Canada, and being involved a little bit with minor hockey in Windsor, and I also work with a junior B team in the area as well. It's a very vast difference between short-term and long-term investment. In Europe, they get that you're not trying to create the best 10-year-old on the ice or the best 12-year-old on the ice, where here we do want the immediacy, like you guys were talking about earlier. We want to have. There's two things that kind of I take away from that, and I know I'm kind of jumping to different topics here, but one, the thinking or the mindset in Canada and the U.S. from the groups that I've talked to is you've got to win when you're 9. You got to win when you're 12. You got to win when you're 14. You got to win when you're 16. And winning is what develops the culture, and winning is what develops the player. The second part of that, in the same kind of vein, is they want to be the best 10-year-old on the ice. They want to be the best 12-year-old on the ice. They want to be the best 14-year-old on the ice. Where in Europe, the winning comes from the development that they've done in the 9-year-old to 16, 17-year-old range, and the talent and the same thing from the players, because their draft is always a specific year. The NHL draft is always a specific year. And ultimately their look at this is a 12-year-old, the best 12-year-old in their association or in their country or whatever it is, does not necessarily mean they're going to be the best player when it's draft day or when they're trying to get these players onto their first teams at 22, 23 years old. So it's the big difference that I think has really hurt us, being North American specifically, in having those conversations with these clubs, is the short term to the long term immediacy and investment, and how these programs are taking their time teaching players A skill, B skill, C skill over a couple of years, where here we want it done in, like Mike said, in a couple of months, and we want to see the development almost practice by practice or game by game. So just my insight on that.
Any questions for Matt? Anybody?
Well, I think that that's really the big difference. Is Erica told me in Finland there, he said, we can't cut a kid when they're 10 years old because they haven't grown yet.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they don't have enough players. They develop everybody. And a lot of times it's the average player that was small that passes everybody later.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I remember coaching some kids, 85 born kids, and the two tiny guys, absolutely tiny. One made the NHL and one made won the Hobie Baker Award. And, you know, like, and I know the one that made the NHL, he played out outside of town in Airdrie, this Airdrie Extreme. And they told his dad, they said, well, he'll probably kill penalties, get the odd shift, but, you know, whatever. So his dad went and he coached him in the town they lived in. And, you know, like he didn't make a bantam team because he was small. So that's the difference, I think. One of the big differences.
And Tom, you're right in the fact that, you know, in Canada and the US, we can throw a tennis ball down the street and find 25 hockey players, where in Finland and some of these other smaller countries, they have to develop every player because they don't have a lot of players to really pick from in the pool. You know, there was an interesting stat that I had found in talking to Jungalder Mannheim about arena accessibility. And them talking about how there was more arenas in Toronto than there is in the entire country of Germany. Population-wise, it's not even close, right? It's what it was. I think it was 38 million in Canada, 83 million in Germany, something like that. So the accessibility isn't there. So they do have to develop. There is much more of a thought process of developing everybody as opposed to the top 10%. But the thinking from Mannheim, especially when they're looking at their first team, is you know, we don't know what the top 10% is until they're probably 18, 19, 20 years old. So why would we not give them all the opportunity to surprise or develop late or whatever the case may be?
Yeah, and I'll say to parents that the only really important place that they play is junior.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they can be the big star, you know, really young, but it doesn't really mean anything.
Right.
Matt, do they bring up escalate players in age groups? Do they have 15-year-olds, elite 15-year-olds in Finland, moving up to play at the older age levels?
They'll try to, yeah, and that seems to be one of the benefits that a lot of the players that I've talked to are discussing, and same thing with the first team, or, you know, you've got kids in U16 that play with the U18, special players that might be able to play in the first team when they're at U18 and that. So yeah, they do quite a bit of that, and bringing those players into those different situations to kind of not even necessarily evaluate, but more see how they respond, and kind of use that for their own development. Because like Tom had said, there's always an escalator to that. So a kid from U16 goes up to U18. That means somebody from lower has to go upper, and there's just constantly a chain reaction to that.
See, in Canada, we have that Bantam draft.
Mm-hmm.
And in Ontario, it's a year later, which is huge.
Yeah.
Here it's a Bantam draft. So the disconnect with my kid getting drafted and development is made.
Mm-hmm.
And it becomes sort of an entitlement expectation. They've invested money. And the draft at that young age contributes to the disconnect. And it really is the demise of the game.
Mm-hmm.
So, Dominic, go ahead, please.
Just to speak to that development model. So I was in Switzerland for 9 years with Cloten and then with Zurich. And, you know, they've taken their model from the coaches that have come in. I know whether it was Yursanov that Tom had worked with in Salzburg, or whether it was the Swedes, or you know, and the one thing that really stood out to me and how they did, and you touched on it a little bit, is that you're able to go, if you're Novitsyn, which is, I think it's like 12, 13 years old, and I could be off. You're able to play up, you're able to play down, you're not. And so from a development perspective, you're able to slot kids in if they're more physically mature. Yes, they're able to play up and they're able to play junior, or they're able to play with the pro team or practice with the pro team and be able to move up and down. And obviously the numbers are less, but the just from a standpoint, and I know even as me playing for on the pro team, coming back from injury, I'd go skate with the junior team, and you had that ability to be able to move up and down. And the kids that were a Cloten flyer as initiation would be all the way up till they could play with the same club all the way up until pro. So like the, I guess it would be a soccer model, or very familiar or similar to the Frölundas or the Farestads in Sweden. And so from my perspective, it was really interesting to see. You know, the other side of it is that, and I'm sure you've, you know, documented it, but they'll stay within that group of that hockey group. They'll stay with them, you know, for the course of the whole year, and they'll take 3 weeks off from the ice, and then they'll start their off ice, and they'll be doing all different sports. And so it's interesting. And I think from that sides of things, it's the overall development of the players seems to be, from my perspective, just a huge advantage there. Now, I don't know you would be able to do that in Canada just with the sheer numbers and the different interests you touched on. The skill coaches, when you're at the NHL level and you're calling in Adam Oates to come in and run power plays and whatever else have you, how can you not expect somebody who's playing 15 AAA to think, oh, I've got this skill coach that's going to come in? So it's tough, right? And you know, when coaching the pro level, I would have guys, oh, I had a phone call with this coach and this is what he's seeing. Well, that's great, you know, but you know, I'm paid to help you, and we're running this system, if you will, and that's great that he sees that. But you know, so it's tough. It's extremely difficult to be able to get the buy-in that the people trust you, and people trust what you're doing, and it makes it extremely difficult. But yeah, just wanted to kind of bring that up about Switzerland and their development, and their clubs and the way that they run it. Zurich and Cloten in Switzerland are kind of the two biggest ones as far as developmentally, and you know they've taken a lot from the different countries, for whether it's Andy Murray that came in and coached in Davos, or you look at Ron Wilson that was there in Davos, or you look at the Russians or the Swedes and whatever else have you. So interesting melting pot there in Switzerland as well. So you're on mute, Wally.
The attrition, the quitting of playing in Europe is most in competitive sports in North America. Kids usually quit playing a sport by the time they're 14. Now, is there this attrition in sports, in hockey in Europe, in the country that you've been in? Are there people quitting, or are they investing in those programs and staying there?
You talking to me, or was that question directed at me, Wally?
Matt.
Or
Well, both
Matt?
of you, but I'm
Yeah,
asking.
no, that would be better.
Yeah.
Better suited. He's seen a lot of different programs. So
Yeah, I think the one thing that I've found with a few of the clubs, Frölunda in particular, is they do talk quite a bit about not just the kids playing, but possibly down the road coaching, even more possibly down the road sponsoring, and kind of creating that experience and keeping it with them. So I don't know specifically what dropout rates are like in particular. I think one of the bigger things that some countries in Europe have to deal with is hockey is not number one. That there's a lot of other sports that kids are getting involved with, and quite possibly younger. So I don't know what that looks like as far as how many kids will leave, or how many kids will are finished playing at a particular age group. But I do know with these countries specifically, they do think of the experience specifically in the sense that they're trying to keep the loyalty to the program and all that is going. So, but I don't know what that looks like as far as dropout rates.
Well, I've got a question here. Having been over there and seen what they've done well, what have we got to learn from their models?
Yeah, so from the time that in the conversations and stuff that we've had with them, I think the the biggest thing or one of the bigger things that I'd learned with them is just the consistency in the model. I think what tends to happen in our area, and this might specifically just be because of age groups, or it may just be a very small window of places, is again, the voice is coming from every different angle of different ideas, different ways that particular player should be contributing, where there seems to be a bit more loyalty to the program itself than it's a place for them to play hockey. In some of those countries, or most, I should say, the ones that I kind of focus with, they have a choice to go to play with whatever club they want to play with. I know in our area, we're specific to our zone, or geographics, whatever it is. So you kind of play who you play for depending on where you live, where there is a little more, lack of a better term, cachet to the program itself. So there is some loyalty that gets developed from that. And there is a lot of recruiting that gets done at a young age, intentionally and unintentionally. So that means, Jokerit does skating schools. So they are, hoping to be the first introduction to a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old to actually touching blade to ice. So you're trying to keep them in the system that way. They do kind of go outside their borders a little bit from the particular communities that they're in to recruit better players. They do community groups as well. So Jokerit coaches will go to different youth clubs, their community clubs, to help practices and stuff like that. So there's a little more exposure to that there, but there is a lot more, if anything, to compare it to. It's almost as if at a younger generation, the loyalty that you have to the university that you go to in the States. One thing that I don't see at all from where I stand, and being in Windsor, right across from Detroit, I probably see it more than most. Like I went to Humber College in Toronto. It doesn't really mean much of anything to me other than that's where I got my diploma. I've got friends in Michigan that go to Michigan State, and she could be the most beautiful woman in the world, but if she wears maize and blue, she's not going to touch her, right? There's an alliance to where you went to school, and there's also I see in these European programs an alliance to where you grew up or what program you grew up in. So that starts from it right from the get-go for them. But I think ultimately one of the bigger separations, and it was funny doing these experiences and going through these programs, is a lot of them have the same things in mind, and they each have their own little different niche to it. But people is number one, the development is number two, and giving players the opportunity to experience different avenues, like we had said, playing a little bit higher or keeping them in the train as opposed to trying to drop them out because they might not make a U14 team or something like that, trying to find different opportunities for them that way too. So there's a lot to that as well, but it is really a philosophy mindset of the long-term investment as opposed to the kid at 9 years old has to be able to do this, and this, or this coach is not doing a very good job, or this program is not doing a very good job. We'll just move. We'll just go somewhere else. Where, Jokerit specifically sends out a model to parents that, we work in the four quadrants of hockey, playing offense with the puck, offense without the puck, defense of the puck holder or puck handler, and defense without the puck handler. And one year one entire season might just be dedicated to playing offense without the puck. So they play games, they play practices. The coaches afterwards are talking specifically about that entity. You could lose 7-0 in a game, but if the focus is playing offense without the puck, that's the conversation that gets had after the game in the next practice, where the results, the winning, losing, all of that, it just truly doesn't matter. The one that I just finished doing was with Zug in Switzerland. And I had to talk to their coaches and a few other people. And I had to specifically ask them when winning starts to matter, because coach after coach, GM, trainer, nobody even mentioned it. They didn't talk about it at all. And I asked when winning matters, and their answer is winning matters when the development has started to come through, when we've kind of put the pieces together. Now, we see what we have, and that for some of these programs is U18, which I think is, from a mindset of Canada specifically, is a ludicrous idea to bring up to somebody and saying that we're not worried about these kids winning or losing until they're 17 years old. I don't think there's a lot of people that would buy that, buy what you're trying to sell there.
Well, Matt, I'm going to throw this at you here. In Europe, do they shorten the bench? And we're talking, I'll give you an example, 3 lines.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, all 3 periods, start a different line each period. Or do they go 1, 2, 1, 2, 3? In the third period, 1, 2, 1, 2. And what happens? Are they faced with the dilemma of thinking that winning is shortening the bench and developing? They miss the boat. So is that happening in Europe as much as in North America?
I'd suggest, especially at the earlier ages, the only way it is doing it, they are doing it, is strategically, in the sense of maybe more special teams than anything else. And even Shattuck St. Mary's kind of hits on this, and it was very interesting from being an age group difference of high school kids. But we'll rotate through the power play all year, and up until Christmas break or the new year or something like that, and then we'll have two specific lines. Some programs talk about having a secret third line, in the sense of they will throw these kids out there in a game possibly, and depending on the situation, and see how they respond and put that note in their back pocket and kind of move on. So sometimes they will, from a durability standpoint, with some of their top players, double shifting them at the end of a game, putting them in different situations just to see how they respond and if they can keep up, or if they're getting tired, or kind of things like that. It seems to be much more strategic, at least from the younger coaches that I was talking to, about doing that, as opposed to trying to win the game.
It's manipulated, Wally.
For sure.
Not managed. They manipulate it.
That's right.
Tom,
like that.
Tom Malloy.
Yeah, as Matt said, our whole program is based on the 4-game playing rules, like you talked about. On offense with the puck and supporting the puck, and defense checking the puck carrier. So everything that Johanni, because being Finnish, everything that we do is organized like that. And then when I run practices, that's the themes I have for different practices. Is, this way you don't leave out things then. You cover all of the different aspects of the game, and I've been doing it for so long, it seems illogical not to do it to me now. That's the way that you would do it. So yeah, and I have a Hockey Coaching ABC's website that it's all organized on, on those 4-game playing rules as well. So anyways, just want to throw that in.
It's very different. Yeah, it's a very different thinking.
Sorry, I had to go down and get a delivery, and Matt, I apologize. I told Matt these could go till like 4:00 in the afternoon, so he might be. I think he's too nice to jump off, but it's great to have you on, and I really do. I think you can add a lot to the group, and Wally, we'll send out a link. So we're doing a live Directors Club with Matt next Tuesday, all about like the pillars of these programs, and really diving into the back end of what they do, not their success, but really like the commonalities of what these programs have to offer. I think it's a little off the youth hockey path, only because it's so hard for youth programs, to Matt's point, to embrace like that. Like that's a huge shift in culture. If you were to say, we're going to pick you when you're 8 and we want you to stay with us till you're 18. Like, we're not going to cut you. We're not going to, our job is not to go find the next best kid down the street. It's to develop you. It's such a huge cultural shift that I think we've missed the boat here in North America. And it's really, really hard to, put that back in the bag. But I don't know. We'll give it a whirl though, for sure.
Matt, I want to thank you for coming on. I think we should have both Matt and Mike come on and sort of the thread of what you're doing, and specifically the experiences you're facing. They're right in line with what the Sharks are wanting to help solve, and it's just trying to make a bit of a difference in whatever way we can right now. And I think we know where all the warts are, and we can remove them or change them or alter them a little bit, make them smaller. But the interesting thing is, when you talk about parents, all parents who put their kids in a program, they want the best thing for their kids, not just hockey wise. They do understand the values of respect and teamwork and hard work and listening skills, behavioral skills. So my focus now at more than ever is educating behavioral coaching. And at times, coaches increase the problem because they don't consistently deal with improper on-ice behavior. A simple example is an extended shift, staying out too long, disrupting the rotation, and then the coach double shifts you. What are the other parents thinking? When they take them off the ice and put take your kid off the ice and put somebody else on, they accept it and don't say anything. And that's, to me, is a crime. When I've seen it happen at a novice 8 level, when it was whole ice hockey, that's happening. And I was told by the president of the association to mind my own business when I brought it up. And of course, I said it was my business and what he was doing was criminal. But some people have to stand up for what they feel. And that's where the parent communication comes in. And the mission statement comes in because it's a chance to put perspective into sports. Like Dean was talking about, we can't lose perspective. That doesn't mean you don't want to win. You actually do win when you do things the right way. You have respect and teamwork. You don't win with the model that of coaching and parenting that thinks extra money, extra ice time, playing with certain people. Those are unhealthy kinds of growth environments. And they're stunting environments and environments that cause problems when they do get to higher levels, behavioral problems, which, you know, our particular governing body is facing right now. I think if stemmed, evolved through the system, and it's something that has to be changed, and I hope it does.